Hello and welcome to ELITECAD at Work with the topic importing terrain data. Today I'll show you how to easily import terrain data from a surveyor into ELITECAD, edit the terrain afterwards, depict the excavation in 2D and 3D, as well as generate a volume calculation of the excavation. I have already imported a site plan into ELITECAD architecture, but I would also like to have the terrain shown in 3D as well. We have received a text file from the surveyor, which I will now import. Using the input assistant in the top right hand corner, I open the terrain function by entering the text terrain. Now I can use the terrain options button to enter some more parameters, such as the thickness of the terrain, materials and settings for height lines. Now I click on import and select the desired text file. Of course, this also worked with the file formats E57, LAS and LAZ just as easily as with the file I selected. Click on open and the next window opens automatically, where I can choose which separators to use and which order the XYZ coordinates should have. As soon as I click on OK, the terrain is imported correctly in height and position, and as you can see, it is immediately displayed in 3D. In order to be able to edit the terrain further and to reconstruct how it looked before my modifications, I first have to freeze it. Let's do this by first clicking on the button Exterior Contour and select Contour in the Terrain toolbar. I have already drawn a contour that I can select. Then I click on the button Save Reference Terrain. Now I'm asked whether I want to save this terrain with or without modifications. If I had to modify the terrain before freezing it, for example because I still had to define an excavation of an existing basement, I have to save the terrain with modification. In my case, I choose without. Because the outer shelter of my building already exists, I will now start to define the excavation of the building. To do this, I make the desired floor visible, select the command Excavation in the Terrain toolbar and select Contour for the type of contour definition. I draw a rectangle over the area I want and a window opens. Here I enter a name, the height as well as the inclination angle, descent angle, the gradient of the excavation base or materials for the 3D presentation and confirm with OK. Now I have the excavation in 3D in my terrain. I do the same for the foundations and the shaft pit of the lift, and in no time I have a terrain model with excavation. I can now display the terrain in 3 different ways: terrain mode with structure, terrain mode without excavation and terrain mode with excavation. In addition, I also can display the height lines or hide and show the hatching of the embankment edge. I can change and edit all areas and heights at any time, and I can even set the inclination angle individually for each embankment edge. If I now want to have a volume calculation, I can also request this directly from the terrain toolbar for the entire excavation, or I click on volume calculation and receive the cubic meters of all individually defined excavations in the info window, depending on the terrain mode. Of course, I have many more possibilities to modify the terrain, such as terrain area and edges, landfill, placing roads and elevations, which I cannot show you all in this short time, so I want to show you the model as it could look finished. So you see how easy and fast it is to import terrain data into ELITECAD architecture and how uncomplicated it is to create the terrain model including excavation and terrain modifications, as well as to get the volume calculation after completion without much effort. See you next time. Feel free to expect more.